Hey dreamer! Tonight we're entering the most elegant trap Victorian society ever invented. A Victorian wedding, a world of lace, sermons and quiet panic, where everyone is smiling and nobody is okay. And one wrong comment can end your social life. It's not your wedding. No, you're a guest. Meaning you exist to sit correctly, clap politely and survive a room full of lace, tears and glove rules written by someone who hated joy. So before we dive into our corset, take a second to like this video and subscribe, or double check if you are already subscribed. It helps the channel more than you think. And leave a comment telling me where you're listening from, and if you could bring one modern item to a Victorian wedding, what would it be? Now, dim the lights, get cozy, enjoy being comfortable, because in a moment you'll be attending a wedding in the Victorian era, and comfort will not be in attendance. Have you ever wondered what it was really like to be a guest at a Victorian wedding? What if you wore the wrong shade of lavender and got exiled to the children's table? How many courses of lukewarm fish in aspic can one human consume before emotionally dissolving into the tablecloth? And how do you breathe normally when your corset has decided your organs are purely decorative? Well, congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1876. You're in England and you're about to attend a real Victorian wedding. Have fun, or I mean, good luck. It arrives wrapped in expectations and regret. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, and an odour of social obligation. You unfold it carefully like it's cursed. The handwriting is suspiciously elegant. You are invited. Not requested, not welcomed. Invited. Which in Victorian English means cancel everything, find a tailor, and start emotionally preparing for judgment by table placement. The ink has been applied with the same force as a papal decree. You have been summoned to the wedding of Miss Clara Bell and Mr. Edward Green, to be held at a country estate with more syllables than plumbing. The phrase "pleasure of your company" appears in a font that implies your presence is obligatory, but your opinions are not. There are tiny roses printed in the margins. They feel accusatory. The date is circled in red, not by you. It arrived like that. The envelope was sealed with wax, as if the invitation might escape if left uncontained. You cracked the seal and immediately felt a phantom corset tighten around your lungs. You are now officially on the guest list, a sacred scroll of names destined to eat lukewarm poultry and smile through awkward conversations with the extended family of strangers. You flip the card over, searching for an exit. Instead, you find transportation notes, instructions for formal but festive attire, and a handwritten message in cursive so florid it might be a summoning spell. We do hope you will be able to attend. There is no question mark, only pressure. Your stomach sinks. Options vanish. Could you feign illness? Stage a fainting spell? Claim the sudden death of a third cousin twice imagined? No. The invitation has already been seen. The butler knows. The cat knows. You must respond. Promptly. With ink. With sincerity you do not possess. You find your best stationery. It smells of old lavender and quiet despair. You write your acceptance with the precision of a treaty and the enthusiasm of a condemned man confirming dinner. You seal it. Stamp it. Drop it in the post like you are surrendering a piece of your soul. Then comes the dread. What colour is festive but not presumptuous? Can you wear lilac, or is that reserved for widows? If you wear white, will the bride scream? If you wear green, will someone mistake it for envy? Is your bonnet too forward, too flirty, too aware of its own circumference? You study the invitation like scripture. Every phrase hides a threat. There will be a ceremony, yes, but also a reception. a receiving line, a toast, a seating chart with more politics than Parliament. You will have to sit beside people who chew with opinions. You will have to nod at speeches you cannot hear. You will be required to smile without revealing any teeth or any sense of personality. The wedding is in 5 days. That is both not enough time and far too much. You make a list. You cross off everything. You rewrite the list. You breathe in. You breathe out. You whisper a prayer to whichever saint handles social obligations, probably the same one who handles indigestion. You try on gloves. None are right. One is too new. One is too worn. One smells faintly of vinegar and fear. You examine your face in the mirror and consider whether you look humble enough, or too humble, or suspiciously humble. You do not know any more. The invitation now rests on your vanity. You tuck it beneath a book titled Etiquette and Self-Preservation. You open to chapter 1. It is called What Not to Say About the Bride's Shoulders, and so it begins. It's time to get ready, time to dress. It begins with fabric. So much fabric. Your wardrobe is a timeline of economic decline and mildew. You must look fashionable but not ambitious, tasteful but not dull, wealthy but not vulgar. There are 11 types of lace and every single one is wrong. You finally settle on a gown that says formally solvent and a bonnet that says please don't seat me near the uncle with opinions. You take another look at your gloves again, too new and they reek of desperation. Too worn and someone will assume you pawned your good ones for jam. One has a mysterious stain you decide not to investigate. You choose the pair that looks clean but unmemorable, like the glove equivalent of bland tea. You steam your gown, then you iron it. Then you realize it has somehow become wrinkled again from the sheer force of your anxiety. Color choice is critical. Pale blue implies sweetness. Pale yellow says you are cheerful but might cry about bees. Anything burgundy makes you look like you're mourning a failed engagement. You try green, then immediately take it off after remembering that Clara Bell, the bride, once wore green to a picnic and everyone talked about it for weeks. You settle on dusty rose. It makes you look soft but not like you can be pushed over. Good enough. Your shoes are another problem. You own one decent pair. They pinch, creak, and make you walk like someone who has made poor life choices, but they match the dress. You attempt to pad them with optimism and cotton. It does not help. You will be attending this wedding with the posture of a startled flamingo, but at least you'll match. You attempt a hairstyle, something elegant but effortless. It takes 3 hairpins, a comb, and the strength of a Roman legion. Then the curls fall. You try again. This time you add a ribbon. The ribbon rebels. Your hair is too clean, too unruly. You pin it into submission, creating something between a chignon and a cry for help. You tell yourself it's romantic. You say it out loud just to believe it. Jewelry is even harder. You need to look adorned, but not like you're flaunting inherited wealth you do not have. You try on your mother's brooch. It features a woman gazing out to sea and has the energy of abandonment. You wear it anyway. It implies mystery, or melancholy. You tell yourself that's fashionable. A cousin sends you a note suggesting you bring a fan. You do not know if this is helpful or a veiled insult about your tendency to glisten. You pack the fan. It is ivory-coloured and shaped like it knows secrets. It will give your hand something to do when conversation fails, which it will. Repeatedly. You plan for accessories. A small embroidered handkerchief for gentle dabbing. A coin purse that does not jingle. A compact mirror that will only reflect your panic. You practice smiling in it. The result is haunting. You practice again. You lower your expectations. Then there is the matter of scent. You need to smell like roses or lavender, or the idea of good health. You dab a bit of floral water behind your ears. You sneeze. You try again, this time with restraint. You smell like someone who can afford soap but not scandal. You look at yourself in the mirror. The overall effect is prepared, not radiant, not stylish, but ready. Like a person who has memorized 30 rules about hat positioning and may still cry if someone says the word seasonal tones. You take a deep breath. You are a guest, a background figure in Clarabelle and Edward Green's emotional spectacle. You do not need to sparkle. You just need to survive. Your carriage smells like damp leather, bad choices, and boiled vegetables. The ride is bumpy, foggy, and just long enough for your anxiety to develop plot twists. You practice polite phrases in your head like, "What a lovely ceremony." Outside the window, London sulks under a curtain of grey mist. The gas lamps flicker with theatrical sadness. You can just make out the outlines of horses, chimneys, and a man urinating into a barrel. It all feels appropriately ominous. Your driver says nothing. He wears a hat that looks like it was once part of a battlefield, and he occasionally mutters things to the horses that may be curses or romantic advice. You attempt to sit with dignity. This is difficult because the bench was clearly designed by someone who hated comfort and the human spine. You clutch your handbag like a lifeline. Inside it, one fan, one embroidered handkerchief, one small square of chocolate wrapped in panic. You brought it in case the pudding was gelatinous and judgmental, which, historically, it will be. The carriage lurches over cobblestones with all the grace of a drunk goat. Your shoulder slams into the side wall. You nod politely, as if thanking the carriage for reminding you that your body is not actually yours today. It belongs to etiquette now, and possibly Clarabelle's seating chart. You review the guest list in your mind. You know the bride, Clara, from a series of increasingly tense garden parties. You met the groom, Edward Green, once at a picnic where he spoke only in adjectives and asked if celery counted as a personality. You're attending this wedding because refusing would cause social fallout so intense it might reach as far as your aunt in Bath. You try to guess who else will be there. Cousins with too many opinions, elderly men who believe soup is a conversation topic, young women who refer to everyone as darling but remember everything you've ever worn. You are already exhausted and you haven't even arrived. Your bonnet tilts to the left. You adjust it. It tilts further. You sigh. The carriage hits a bump. Your ribcage shifts in your corset. Something pops. You wonder briefly if it was a bone or just your optimism. Either way, you are upright again. You look down at your gloved hands. They are shaking slightly. Not with fear exactly. More like anticipation coated in dread. Weddings are supposed to be joyous occasions. This one feels like a stage play where you are a background extra who might get scolded for blinking too loudly. The driver coughs. You say nothing. The fog thickens. You can now see your reflection in the window. You look composed, almost regal, like a person who knows exactly what to do with 12 forks and a pudding course that jiggles with menace, but your stomach feels like it is writing its own diary entry titled, "Why did we say yes to this?" You attempt breathing exercises, in through the nose, out through clenched teeth. You hum quietly to yourself, choosing a hymn that implies calm but not enthusiasm, something you can nod to later if someone brings up church without actually committing to a belief system. The ride stretches on. You have time to reflect on your life choices. Why did you agree to this? Why did you eat so many pickled onions at last week's luncheon? Why does your corset squeak when you breathe? Is this normal? Is this fine? The carriage finally slows. You hear gravel under the wheels. A bell tolls somewhere in the distance. Possibly metaphorical. Possibly real. The manor is just ahead, looming through the mist like a tax audit with roses. You're almost there. You sit up straighter. You smooth your skirt. You whisper a final prayer to the patron saint of socially acceptable small talk. The carriage stops. The door opens. And now it begins. The wedding is held at a country manor the size of moral obligation. You step out of the carriage and onto gravel so crunchy it sounds like you are breaking commandments. A footman with disdainful eyebrows takes your coat and 40% of your dignity. You follow the sound of anxious laughter into a house decorated entirely in wallpaper and consequences. The front door is already open, which feels aggressive. You are greeted not with warmth, but with an assessment. A servant looks you up and down the way one might inspect fruit for bruises. You nod politely. They nod back with the enthusiasm of someone who has seen 20 versions of you today and is praying none of them are dramatic. The entryway is too large, a cavern of floral patterns and cold marble. You are immediately flanked by potted ferns that seem both decorative and threatening. You consider whether they are arranged to guide you somewhere or to hide something. You whisper a polite compliment to the nearest one just in case it has influence. Inside, everything smells like beeswax, old wood, and the faint stress of too many secrets. There is a grandfather clock ticking in the corner with the determination of a debt collector. A painting of someone's stern ancestor stares at you from the wall. You wonder if he approves of your gloves. You assume not. You are shown to the hallway, where other guests are already gathering in small clusters of politeness and panic. You recognize no one, which is both a relief and a threat. Strangers cannot judge you for past sins, but they can invent new ones. You hover near a side table stacked with pamphlets about the estate's history, and try to appear both curious and incapable of starting a conversation. A woman in lilac walks by. She glances at your bonnet. You glance at her gloves. This is Victorian warfare. No one will die, but someone's confidence will be permanently injured. The manor is full of mirrors. One reflects your face from a low angle and nearly gives you a heart attack. Another is placed directly across from a statue of a nude cherub. You try not to look at either. A third mirror is angled just slightly wrong, which you suspect is deliberate. You catch sight of yourself again and immediately regret not bringing more face powder and less soul. A maid with terrifying posture offers you a tray of something fizzy. You accept. It tastes like flowers and tension. You sip anyway. You need something to do with your hands. You cannot hold your own wrist like a ghost, and the wallpaper is too floral to lean on. You are briefly introduced to a woman whose name you miss entirely. She says something about the bride's hairstyle being very youthful. You nod, not sure whether that is a compliment or a coded warning. She then refers to the groom's chin as noble. You nod again, wondering if she has ever seen a chin before. The receiving area fills with murmurs and silk rustling. Everyone seems to be pretending they just arrived, even if they have clearly been standing there for 20 minutes. You do the same. A butler walks by and gently corrects the angle of a lampshade. You wonder if you too are slightly off and in need of adjustment. You are offered another drink. You decline. You are still processing the first one. A small group has begun discussing the weather with deep conviction. You consider joining, then remember you once described a fog as dramatic and were nearly uninvited from a christening. You decide to lurk near a vase instead. Before you even reach the ceremony, you're handed a quill and directed to a guest book the size of a tombstone. You have to sign it. If your handwriting wobbles, it is a character flaw. If your ink blotches, it is social suicide. You scan the previous signatures for gossip. Someone has written their name with a flourish so aggressive it feels like a political statement. The ink is a deep blue, bordering on smug. You pause just long enough to let the name dry. The guestbook rests on a carved oak table that looks like it has opinions. A doily sits beneath it like an overly ambitious coaster. There is a vase of peonies beside you that might be judging your posture. You grip the quill. It feels wrong. Too long, too feathery, too much like it might summon something if handled incorrectly. You hold it steady and begin your name. First letter, graceful. Second, acceptable. Third, disaster. Your hand stutters. The loop becomes a blob. You glance around. Did anyone see? A nearby footman blinks with the indifference of a man who has witnessed worse, but will absolutely tell someone anyway. You finish the rest of your name as if nothing happened. The final curve of your last letter flattens out like your optimism. You set the quill down, not too forcefully, not too casually. With the solemn energy of someone releasing a dandelion into the wind and hoping no one notices the sweat on your upper lip. You step back and examine the guestbook like a crime scene. Your signature now joins a chaotic mixture of family names, society notables, and people pretending they do not care who else is on the list. You see names you recognize and others you pretend to. The list is a map of fragile alliances and subtle jabs. One entry simply says Mrs. D in looping script so large it touches the margins. You do not know who she is, but she clearly believes you should. Another signature includes a Latin motto beneath it, just in case anyone forgot that someone once studied at Oxford and now thinks that knowledge of dead languages should travel everywhere like a spare tooth. You move away so the next guest can approach. They sign with the ease of someone who has never questioned a single decision in their life. You resent them instantly. They wear confidence like a stole. You shift your weight and try to remember whether you have spinach in your teeth, despite not having eaten spinach in days. A hush settles as an older gentleman signs the book. His quill work is flawless. He dots the I with a flick that practically winks. Several guests nod in appreciation. A woman near the curtain sighs faintly. Someone else fans themselves for no reason other than to appear interested in ventilation. You are now trapped in the gentle queue of people who have signed and do not know what to do next. A maid offers you a card with your seating number on it. The number is handwritten, of course, because printing numbers is apparently vulgar. You thank her with a nod that tries to communicate gratitude, grace, and a plea to be seated near someone who does not whisper through their teeth. You tuck the card into your glove, hoping it absorbs your panic. The glove resists. You now float toward the ceremony room with the awkward shuffle of a person trying not to stand out while also trying not to trip on someone's hem. You glance back at the book. It remains there on its pedestal, quiet and eternal, a record of everyone who came and how badly they trembled while pretending they did not care. And just like that, your name is now part of history, or at least part of the decorative table near the fern that smells faintly of regret. You are guided toward the pews by a woman who communicates exclusively through nostril flares. Seating is a hierarchy puzzle where your placement reflects your entire social history. You are not quite family, but you are not quite not family. So you are placed in the 5th row, close enough to witness the drama, far enough to avoid inheritance. The pew creaks as you sit. letting out a long, disapproving sigh like a distant aunt. You perch with the posture of someone trying to look both grateful and emotionally neutral. The woman next to you gives a tight smile, the kind that says, "I remember something you said in 1872 and have not forgiven you for it." You smooth your skirt and try to make yourself smaller, which is difficult in a dress that contains enough fabric to curtain a modest library. The man on your other side smells faintly of mothballs and confidence. He adjusts his cravat like it is a moral compass and stares straight ahead, waiting for the ceremony to begin or society to collapse, whichever comes first. The chapel is beautiful in a way that suggests guilt. Heavy wooden beams, tall stained glass windows, and a carved pulpit that looms like it has opinions. The walls are covered in ivy that is either romantic or trying to reclaim the building. A harpist plays something slow and thoughtful, like a eulogy for emotional freedom. Guests continue to file in. Each arrival triggers a ripple through the crowd. People turn to look, hats tilt, eyes narrow. A woman in the second row shifts slightly to block someone's view, a silent maneuver that suggests decades of training. The fourth row is clearly where the aunts sit. You hear one whisper something about someone else's hemline and the word tragic. The first row, of course, is for the main characters. Clarabelle's mother sits in the exact centre, upright and trembling with a mix of pride and control. Her hat is enormous. Her expression is unreadable. She clutches a handkerchief that looks more decorative than useful. Next to her is Mr. Green's father, who appears to be made entirely of tweed and disdain. He keeps checking his pocket watch like he suspects time is trying to cheat him. Behind them are cousins, uncles, family friends, and people who used to matter more. They chat in whispers, nod meaningfully, and pretend they are not silently ranking everyone else. It is a room filled with velvet, lace, and unspoken rivalries. You glance at the programme, which is printed on parchment so thick it might count as a shield. It lists the order of service, the music, and a short paragraph about love that makes your teeth hurt. The font is unnecessarily elegant. You read it twice and still do not know what it says. A child 2 rows ahead drops something metal. It clangs. Everyone flinches. The child is removed by a woman with a tight bun and the energy of someone who once cleaned a rug so hard it confessed a secret. Silence returns. The organ groans, heads swivel. The wedding is beginning. You sit straighter. You fix your expression. You prepare to witness. The doors open. There is a collective inhale as the first bridesmaid enters, moving slowly and stiffly like she's being rolled on tiny wheels. Her dress is pale blue and full of consequence. More bridesmaids follow. Then, finally, Clarabelle. The bride appears at the end of the aisle like a myth wrapped in lace. Her veil is thick, her bouquet is trembling, and her smile is the kind you practice in front of a mirror until your jaw hurts. She walks slowly, arm in arm with a man who is either her father or someone who was recruited for the role at the last minute. You do not cry. You do not sigh. You simply watch as the ceremony begins and the next chapter of obligation unfolds before you. The vicar clears his throat and silence falls like a curtain of starch. The bride floats in on a sea of tulle and nerves. The groom looks like he's having a mild allergic reaction to commitment. You try not to cry, cough, sneeze or sigh in a way that implies disbelief. The vows are whispered, the prayers are long, and the glances are sharp enough to trim hedges. The vicar has eyebrows that seem to move independently from the rest of his face. One rises slightly at the word cherish. The other twitches at the phrase forsaking all others. You wonder if they are judging the couple or conducting a silent protest. Either way, they are more expressive than his voice, which hums at a steady monotone only slightly more animated than a tombstone. Clara Bell's veil billows slightly in a breeze that no one else can feel. It casts a soft shadow across her nose, giving her the tragic look of a woman in a painting titled "Regret with Florals." Edward Green blinks often and adjusts his collar exactly 4 times. You count because focusing on numbers is the only thing keeping you from internally screaming about whether you are supposed to stand, kneel, or dissolve into mist. This ceremony is being held in a chapel with excellent acoustics and even better judgment. Every cough echoes like a warning. Every shuffle of fabric is met with a ripple of glares. You shift your weight, and the pew responds with a creak that sounds vaguely accusatory. You freeze. Even your knees stop breathing. The vicar begins his sermon. He speaks of love as a duty, a journey, and a form of character development. He references a Greek philosopher, 2 psalms, and a parable about a goat that may or may not be relevant. You nod gently, pretending to absorb wisdom, while quietly wondering how long your corset can support both posture and panic. The bride and groom hold hands. His palm twitches. Her fingers grip like someone clinging to the last biscuit at a formal tea. A bead of sweat rolls down Edward's temple, performs a brief dance, and vanishes into his collar. Clara's smile has not moved in 20 minutes. It has become its own entity. You fear it may remain permanently fixed. A hymn begins. You do not know the words. You mouth something that could be mistaken for reverence or confusion. The people behind you sing confidently and slightly off-key. A woman 2 rows ahead lifts her hymn book with theatrical grace, and you accidentally make eye contact with the back of her head. It feels personal. The vicar returns to the pulpit. He gestures with his hands as if sculpting invisible truths. He begins the vows. Edward speaks first. His voice cracks slightly, which is received by the audience as either emotion or indigestion. Clara responds with a whisper so delicate it could be mistaken for wind. The vicar declares them joined, legally, spiritually, and fashionably. There is a moment of pure stillness, a collective breath. The kiss is brief, almost theoretical. The applause is soft and uneven, as if everyone is unsure whether they are allowed to clap, or if doing so will reveal them as common. You pat your gloves together once and immediately stop, worried it was too enthusiastic. The organ plays again, louder this time. The couple turns to face the crowd, victorious and visibly relieved. Clara's eyes scan the pews with the precision of someone cataloguing reactions for later analysis. Edward exhales so deeply his boutonniere trembles. They walk down the aisle together, followed by a trail of lace, petals, and repressed emotion. You stand, because everyone else does, and attempt a smile that says how lovely while also meaning please let me sit again soon. And just like that, they are married. The guests begin to file out, murmuring things like beautiful service and such a perfect match while mentally rating the decorations and secretly wondering what the cake will look like. You remain still for a moment, absorbing the weight of the event and the faint smell of wax and roses. Now begins the mingling. You shuffle into the garden with your arms at the approved 45-degree angle. You're expected to compliment everything. The bride's glow, the groom's posture, the weather, even though it smells like wet wool and regret. Someone mistakes you for a cousin. You nod and flee. The garden is vast, neatly trimmed, and full of bees with no sense of personal space. The grass has been crushed flat in some areas by overly enthusiastic shoes. Everyone is milling about with the same expression of cautious celebration, like a group of diplomats waiting for a treaty to be signed. A waiter offers you a glass of something bubbly. You accept. It tastes like carbonated nerves and apple peel. People speak in hushed excitement, tossing phrases around like what a lovely couple and so tasteful. The compliments feel rehearsed. A woman in pale green sighs, clasps her hands, and declares it all so romantic you could scream. You nod supportively while trying to inch away before she tells you her thoughts on embroidery as a form of flirtation. You are approached by a man with hair like a hedge and a cravat too ambitious for his neckline. He asks how you know the bride. You say something vague about school, which is both technically true and completely misleading. He nods and starts talking about turnip farming as if it's a metaphor for marriage. You sip your drink. You consider hiding behind a hedge. Nearby, Clara Bell and Edward Green are doing the rounds. Clara smiles with regal efficiency, her veil now tucked behind one ear like a napkin after a dramatic dinner. Edward is shaking hands with relatives who all seem to be ranking him silently. They pause at every guest, nod graciously, and move on just before anyone can say something heartfelt. It is like watching a parade of socially acceptable distance. You're introduced to someone's aunt. Her name is a mystery, but her handshake is firm and her opinions are louder than the bees. She tells you the flowers are nice but a bit too yellow. She tells you the vicar's sermon lacked spine. She tells you that once in 1849 she saw a better cake. You nod as if she has shared something precious. Someone spills a drink near the petunias. A footman appears with a cloth and removes the evidence with such speed, you wonder if he is part of a secret clean-up unit trained by the military. The guest who spilled it blinks slowly and begins describing the experience as humbling. A pair of elderly men argue near the rose bushes about whether the vows were too short. One insists that anything under 8 minutes is lazy. The other declares anything over 5 is self-indulgent. You stand between them briefly, unsure whether to agree or fake a coughing fit. You choose coughing and drift away. You try to make polite conversation with a young woman who immediately begins telling you about her sister's wedding. She does not stop for breath. She describes the dress, the dessert, the string quartet, the way the groom blinked during the blessing. You nod and make 3 separate attempts to escape, but her story has no ending. Eventually she's distracted by a pigeon, and you slip away like a guilty butler. The applause for the couple's exit from the garden is uneven and delayed, as if no one was sure if that was the moment. The clapping dies out in patches. A child throws a flower petal with great force. A guest yells "bless you" at the wrong time. You find a shady corner near a stone statue of something heroic and try to look like you are reflecting. In truth, you're thinking about the canapes and whether one more might restore your will to socialize. The mingling continues. The bride glows, the groom endures. The air thickens with effort and pollen. The newlyweds pose for a photo. But this is 1876. Photography is a siege. You are summoned to join the group portrait, which involves standing perfectly still for what feels like 6 decades. You are not allowed to blink, breathe, or express opinions. Somewhere in the background, a guest faints quietly behind a fern. The camera itself looks like it might explode at any moment. It is a large wooden box on shaky legs, covered with what appears to be a stolen tablecloth. The photographer is a man in a vest 2 sizes too small, who insists on referring to the camera as she. He gestures at the wedding party like he is directing a military operation. You are placed on the left, behind a bridesmaid who smells faintly of lily water and social ambition. Everyone is arranged in rows, tall people at the back, children and emotionally fragile relatives at the front. You are in the middle row, slightly left of centre, the photographic equivalent of "Please do not speak." Clara Bell and Edward Green are positioned at the heart of the arrangement, looking like two dolls in a museum exhibit titled Matrimony and Repression. The photographer steps back, peers under the cloth, and mutters something about lighting and immortal souls. He adjusts the lens with the delicacy of a man diffusing a bomb. A maid is sent to open the curtains wider. A butler holds a reflective board made from polished tin to bounce light onto the bride's forehead. The effect is blinding and symbolic. You are told to look serene. This is difficult. Your shoes are pinching. Your corset is squeezing. A bee is investigating your left ear. You cannot move. You cannot even flinch. The bridesmaid in front of you whispers something about the groom's hair looking startled. You do not respond because your jaw has locked from fear. Someone's hat falls off. The photographer sighs like a man who has witnessed the fall of an empire. The hat is repositioned. A flower is tucked back into place. A small boy sneezes and is quietly removed. The bride's veil shifts in the breeze. 3 people attempt to repin it at once, nearly knocking her over. She does not blink. She's operating on pure adrenaline and bridal glue. Hold still, the photographer says for the 3rd time, as if anyone is still voluntarily in this position. Your left leg has gone numb. Your right eye is twitching. You try to focus on a fixed point in the distance, possibly the afterlife. A man behind you whispers that he thinks his hip has locked. You nod once, gently, and immediately regret it. The photographer counts down. 5, 4. He pauses. The sun has shifted. A new shadow appears on the groom's collar. There is a flurry of fabric and outrage. A cushion is shoved behind someone's back for symmetry. The camera is re-angled. The photographer adjusts his waistcoat with great ceremony, then peers under the cloth again. 3, 2, 1. Hold. No one breathes. There is a long silence. Then the shutter clicks with a dramatic clunk like a final decision. Everyone exhales at once. Shoulders drop, eyes blink, ankles are unbuckled. A woman nearby begins to sob, possibly from relief. Someone else removes their gloves and fans their face like they've just escaped a hostage situation. Clara Bell smiles for real for the first time all day. Edward looks like he has just survived a duel with a moderately priced sofa. The photographer nods. He will develop the image. It will take 3 days. It might come out blurry. It might not come out at all. He does not promise anything. He simply says, "Lovely," and begins packing up the camera like a man who has just finished taming a lion. You retreat from the portrait area feeling strangely empty. You have left part of your soul behind, trapped forever in that photograph, along with your bad side and a bee that never left. It is time for refreshments. But there is not much time for recovery. No chance to hide behind a shrub and regroup. Because now, of course, it is time for the receiving line. You are herded into a queue to greet the couple and their families. Each person must deliver a phrase that sounds original, but is exactly the same as the last. What a lovely service. You look radiant. I love what you've done with the altar candles. It is a conveyor belt of praise and anxiety. The line itself moves at the speed of social fear. Too slow, and you risk making actual conversation. too fast, and it looks like you're trying to escape. Everyone is performing a delicate dance of compliments, eye contact, and polite shoulder angles. You practice your line in your head, something heartfelt but forgettable, something that will neither offend nor inspire follow-up questions. Ahead of you, someone is telling the groom that his boutonniere was bold. You cannot tell if this is a compliment or a warning. The groom nods with a frozen smile and thanks them like a man being handed a mysterious jar of jam. Behind you, a woman is adjusting her glove like she's preparing to duel the bride's cousin. The couple stands beside a floral arch so large it may have its own postcode. Clara Bell is still glowing, either from happiness or the weight of 47 hairpins. Edward Green stands beside her, eyes slightly glazed, nodding at each guest like a man trying to remember where he put his socks. They look coordinated. They look exhausted. They look like they might flee at any moment. Beside them are their parents, forming a second gauntlet of handshakes and strategic blinking. Clara's mother is dressed in lavender and has the bearing of someone who once hosted a luncheon that ruined 3 friendships. Edward's father clutches a cane he does not need and surveys the crowd with mild suspicion. His nods are reserved for those deemed acceptable. Your heart pounds, your mouth is dry. You reach the front of the line and panic. You begin to speak and immediately forget the sentence halfway through. What comes out is something between a sigh and the phrase, "such a beautiful curtain." Clara blinks once. Edward nods. You curtsy again, just in case. You move along. Clara's mother offers her hand. You shake it like it is a small, fragile dog. She says thank you for coming in a tone that suggests she knows you had no choice. You thank her for having you, and immediately regret the phrasing. Edward's father says nothing but raises one eyebrow like a punctuation mark of judgment. You smile at it and back away. The person behind you begins their line. You listen. It is almost identical to yours, but with slightly better pacing. You feel both jealous and ashamed. A man in a bright waistcoat tries to tell a joke. It fails. The group responds with a collective hum of polite distress. He is quickly moved along. You stand at the edge of the reception area now, blinking into space. You have survived the receiving line. You cannot remember what you said. You hope no one else can either. Your hands are still clenched. Your cheeks ache from smiling. Your spine feels like it has filed a formal complaint. All around you, guests are doing the same thing, recoiling from the performance, whispering critiques, planning their next glass of wine. The air is thick with rose water and barely concealed relief. You hear someone whisper that Edward's handshake was a little moist. You hear someone else say they nearly congratulated the wrong cousin. The line is still moving. The queue stretches out onto the grass. The guests keep arriving, keep smiling, keep saying radiant and stunning and such a unique choice of flower. Somewhere in the middle of it, a man sneezes into his elbow and is gently escorted away by a footman with the precision of a trained magician. You exhale. You have done your part. You have smiled. You have curtsied. You have said the words. You smile again, just to check if it still works. It does. Barely. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, delicate but firm, like a threat in a bonnet. It is time to eat. It is already 4 p.m. and you have been chewing air for hours. You are seated next to a man who has strong opinions about marmalade and no concept of volume. The courses arrive one by one. You smile through it all, praying for a vegetable that has not been boiled to death. The table stretches the length of a bowling lane and is set with enough cutlery to perform minor surgery. Napkins are folded into impossible shapes that make you nervous to unfold them. Your place card stares up at you with quiet judgment. The glassware catches the late afternoon light and refracts it directly into your retinas, forcing you to squint in a way that makes you look suspicious. To your right is the marmalade enthusiast, who is now ranking his favourite preserves in alphabetical order. To your left is a woman who collects teapots and occasionally mutters the phrase dreadful texture without context. The soup arrives in delicate porcelain bowls that look as though they would shatter if you so much as blinked at them wrong. You resist the urge to blow on it, knowing full well that in Victorian society, exhaling on your consommé could lead to exile. The conversation is hushed and strategic. No one wants to speak too loudly lest they be heard, or too softly lest someone lean in and get ideas. You say something vague about the floral arrangements. The woman beside you nods and adds that the peonies are a touch ambitious for the season. You nod again, unsure whether that is an insult or a prophecy. Each course is a puzzle. You're expected to use the correct fork in the correct order, from the outside in, unless of course the host has decided to introduce a surprise course, in which case you must pretend you always knew there would be a second fish dish. The pigeon in aspic is set before you. It wobbles in a way that suggests either danger or spiritual unrest. You poke it gently with your fork. It jiggles. You nod approvingly as if this is what you were hoping for. A footman offers wine. You accept. It tastes faintly of vinegar and expectations. The man across from you raises his glass and says something about Clara Bell's refined taste. You smile and say indeed, unsure if he is referring to the bride or the aspic. You take a bite. It is cold. It is gelatinous. It contains what might be a raisin or might be despair. You chew with conviction and swallow with grace. Bread is passed. You break off a piece. It is dense and unforgiving. You contemplate using it as a weapon. The butter arrives in sculpted curls but is too firm to spread. You scrape at it like a miner hunting for dignity. The marmalade man watches you with interest, then offers an unsolicited lecture on citrus rinds. A parade of dishes follows, something with trout, something with mushrooms, something that might once have been a turnip but has since become philosophical. Each plate is presented like a gift and cleared like a secret. You smile through them all, maintaining an expression of mild wonder and silent desperation. The room grows warmer, the candles flicker. The hum of forks on porcelain is constant. You sip water, you sip wine, you sip something that might be sherry. Your stomach is confused, your spine is rigid. You laugh once at someone's remark about chutney and immediately regret the sound it made. The final meat course is announced. You begin to lose time. By the 12th course, you are no longer eating. You are participating in a silent endurance ritual held together by etiquette and sweat. The dessert has not even arrived. And yet you smile, because this is a wedding, and survival is mandatory. Someone clinks a glass, the toasts begin. You laugh politely, you sip your wine, you fantasize about being struck by lightning just hard enough to excuse yourself. There is a rhythm to Victorian toasts. It begins with overconfidence, followed by a long-winded anecdote, and ends with everyone pretending to understand a Latin quote. The speakers rise one after another, each gripping their glass like it contains not sherry, but courage. Some stand too quickly and wobble. Others clear their throat for so long you fear they may never speak at all. The groom's father begins with the family name. He lists the achievements of distant cousins as though someone in the room has been collecting their trading cards. He references the family motto twice. It is in Latin, and no one knows what it means. He finishes by congratulating the couple with the emotional warmth of a tax receipt. There is a pause, then applause. The kind of applause that sounds like everyone's hands are tired. Next is the bride's uncle, who appears to have memorized half a poem and decided to improvise the rest. He compares love to a lantern, a garden, and a well-waxed shoe, sometimes in the same sentence. He chuckles at his own imagery. You sip your wine and nod at the tablecloth. He ends by crying a little and sitting down on the wrong chair. The room claps more loudly this time, mostly out of relief. Then comes the childhood friend. He is nervous and sweating. He begins a story about Clara Bell and a goat from their school days. It is not entirely clear if the goat is metaphorical. He trails off halfway through a sentence, then picks back up with something about loyalty and fence building. He raises his glass too early and nearly knocks over a candle. A bridesmaid catches it mid-fall and receives spontaneous applause. Your cheeks hurt from smiling. Your hands are sore from clapping. You begin calculating the odds that the next speaker will forget why they stood up. The bride's sister now stands. She's composed and smiling tightly. Her toast is brief but suspiciously polished. She compliments Edward Green's hair. She mentions Clara's talents for watercolours and patience. She finishes by saying marriage is like embroidery. Tedious, beautiful, and full of needles. People laugh, unsure if they were supposed to. She sits. You exhale. Then Edward himself is nudged to stand. He looks like a man being sent into the sea with only a teaspoon and a dream. He thanks everyone in vague terms, stares lovingly at Clara, then tells a short story about a picnic they shared before the engagement. It involves bees. It ends with a joke that almost lands. Clara laughs sweetly. You smile into your glass and pretend to wipe your eye. Clara speaks last. Her voice is clear and warm, despite what must be an emotional circus inside. She thanks her family, her friends, the weather, the staff, the pianist, the florist, and the goat, apparently now a family legend. She calls Edward her dearest friend and partner. Everyone sighs in synchronized affection. Even the waitstaff look briefly moved. More applause, louder this time. Someone dabs their eyes with the lace glove. Someone else mutters about how that's what a proper speech sounds like. You sit very still, hoping there are no more speakers. A man at the far end of the table begins to rise, then sits again after a firm glance from his wife. A collective emotional crisis is narrowly avoided. The toasts are done, the wine is low, and the emotions are high. Music begins, the newlyweds rise like awkward swans. You're expected to watch, smile, and not comment on the groom's odd footwork. Eventually more couples join the floor. A stranger asks you to dance. You oblige, and instantly regret it. Victorian dancing is less fun and more involuntary cardio with eye contact. The violin screeches to life like a haunted cat in a corset. It is joined by a cello that sounds vaguely apologetic, and a piano that seems determined to outshine them both. Together they form the musical equivalent of holding your breath in a polite room. The tempo picks up. The dance begins. You are now spinning in slow, precise circles with someone whose name you did not catch, and whose cologne appears to be mostly brandy and unresolved trauma. Victorian dance is a serious business. There is no room for improvisation. Every step is dictated by ancient rules, passed down through books with titles like Proper Posture for Unwed Ladies and The Acceptable Radius of a Gentleman's Elbow. Your partner appears to have memorized every page and now insists on keeping rhythm with military precision. He counts under his breath. You nod along and pretend this is charming rather than deeply stressful. You attempt small talk. He responds with a monologue about barley tariffs. You nod again and lose your place in the dance. He gently corrects you with a firm wrist and a disappointed smile. Somewhere across the room, a man nearly trips over a decorative urn and is caught by a debutante who pretends it never happened. That is the spirit of the evening. The room spins in controlled chaos. Gloves brush. Eyes dart. Feet shuffle across polished floors with the grace of panicked geese. You try to relax your shoulders, but your spine has decided it now lives in a permanent state of tension. A woman twirls past you, her hairpiece wobbling dangerously. She grins as if this is her fourth wedding of the week. The newlyweds have finished their turn. Clara Bell is radiant and only slightly pink from exertion. Edward Green looks like he survived a minor sword fight. They bow and retreat to the edge of the room where they are immediately handed glasses of something bubbly and praised for their poise. You envy their exit. You, however, are still mid-waltz, with a man who believes elbow placement is a moral issue. He pulls you closer for the turn. You resist the urge to scream. The violinist begins a flourish that seems unnecessary and personal. Your feet begin to protest. Your shoes remind you they were designed for appearance, not movement. Your smile is frozen. Your ankles are plotting an escape. As the dance ends, your partner bows. You curtsy. It is over. Briefly. Because another song starts, and a different stranger appears with a hopeful look and extended hand. This one has a moustache that could qualify for military service and a handshake like a wet envelope. You nod before you can stop yourself. The next dance is faster, livelier, deadlier. Couples move in elaborate patterns, weaving between each other like confused swans in formal wear. You miss a step and bump into someone's cousin. She hisses something about scuffed slippers. You mouth an apology and are immediately spun away. The music plays on. Another song. Another set. Another loop around the Hake battlefield. Your hair has begun to unravel. Your ribs is doing math. You begin to understand how Victorian women fainted without provocation. It was not emotion. It was choreography. Finally, mercifully, the musicians pause. There is applause, not for the music, for the silence. Guests scatter toward the walls like survivors of a minor flood. You stagger to the refreshment table and clutch a glass of tepid lemonade like it contains answers. You're overheated, overstimulated, and deeply aware of your own knees. But you're still upright, which in Victorian terms is practically a medal. Eventually the wedding comes to an end. The guests begin to peel away from the manor like autumn leaves with sore feet. There are air kisses and handshakes, muffled goodbyes, and long pauses where no one knows whether to hug, curtsy, or just nod meaningfully at a hydrangea. You're congratulated by someone you do not recognize for your excellent posture during the second waltz. You thank them sincerely, as if you had any control over your spine. You make the rounds, like a politician 3 scones deep into a scandal. You comment on the floral arrangements. You offer compliments that sound fresh, but are actually copy-pasted from the last 5 weddings you attended. You express vague admiration for the bride's earrings, the groom's cufflinks, the weather's restraint. Everyone smiles too widely. everyone is deeply ready to collapse. Your hat has lost some of its structure and all of its dignity. Your patience has entirely collapsed. Still, you smile at the departing aunt with the feathered fan and tell her it was such a beautiful day. She nods, then begins a long story about gout that you gently interrupt by pretending to sneeze with such sincerity that even you believe it for a moment. The cloakroom is chaos held together by ribbon and thinly veiled contempt. Dozens of guests crowd around the coat hooks with expressions that suggest they may be moments away from declaring a duel over a misplaced muff. Someone insists their shawl was ivory, not eggshell. Someone else is holding 2 parasols and claiming neither. You wait your turn, counting hats, and listening to someone mispronounce Clara Bell's middle name with the confidence of a man who has never been corrected. A footman hands you your coat and avoids eye contact, which is Victorian for "you were a tolerable nuisance." You nod with all the grace you can muster, then promptly get tangled in your own scarf and exit sideways. You pass the guest book on your way out. It now resembles a document of war. Someone has added a second flourish to their name, dramatic enough to imply a duel was fought over ink. Someone else has doodled what might be a goat in the margins. You do not ask questions, you do not look back. The doors of the manor creak open as you step into the evening. The air is cool, damp, and full of blessed silence. The stars are just starting to show, blinking down like tired chaperones. Your carriage waits at the end of the gravel path, already steamed with condensation and smelling faintly of boiled upholstery and regrets. You tip the driver in coins and quiet despair. Inside, the cushions sigh beneath you. Your body uncoils in slow, tired protest. You lean back, press your head against the worn lining, and let your eyelids flutter in the soft gaslight. The horse starts forward with a clop that feels like a lullaby. Behind you, the manor begins to disappear behind a veil of fog and relief. You replay the day in fragments, the ceremony, the aspic, the cue of praise, the footman's eyebrows, Clara Bell's veil, Edward Green's moderately terrified grin. You remember standing very still for the portrait, holding your breath for the camera, then holding your breath again during the toast about the goat. You remember dancing with a man who whispered the price of oatcakes in your ear like it was a secret passed down by druids. There are crumbs in your sleeve, someone else's name pinned to your place card, a flower petal in your shoe. You feel like you survived a historical obstacle course designed by people who valued etiquette more than blood circulation. But still, somehow it was lovely. Strange, exhausting, beautiful in the way only a Victorian wedding can be when viewed through the soft haze of survival. You vow never to do this again, unless the next bride has fewer cousins, or a wedding held entirely by letter, preferably with no seating plan. You sink deeper into the carriage seat, eyes closing, breath slowing. Outside, the countryside rolls past like a painted backdrop. Inside, you dream of a warm bath, a quiet room, and bread that does not jiggle. And somehow, against all odds and lace, you survived. And now, you've earned something rare and sacred. Rest. Good night, dreamer.